Will you give everyone a few more minutes for other people to join? So please feel free to use your chat feature to introduce yourself. We'd love to know who you're here today. So we will start this webinar in a few minutes. Thanks for being here. So let me start the screen, if I may. All right, is everyone seeing screen okay? All right, once again, everyone, welcome. My name is Kanae Haneishi. I am the Associate Professor of Exercise and Sports Science, focusing on K-12 physical education and coaching education at the Western Colorado University in the United States. And I also represent the United States as the TGfU SIG International Advisory Board member. So once again, welcome to the TGfU 40th Anniversary Webinar Series, Introduction to Game-Based Approaches, Seminar number 3. So in this webinar, we will cover the 2 of the 5 critical components of game-based approach. The first one is question and reflection, and the other one is the assessment. We are going to have a question and answer session at the end. But if you have any questions or thoughts and comments during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat feature to write down your questions or comments. And then like we said, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as well if you're comfortable. So moving on. Okay, so briefly about the TGfU and then that organization. So TGfU, Teaching Games for Understanding, SIG, Special Interest Group, is a worldwide organization that is represented by TGfU experts from all over the world. So here are the 5 critical components for learning to teach and coach with GBA. So the first one was the tactical concept and problems. And the second one was the game modifications. And the third one and the fourth one, which we will cover today, is the third one is using questions and reflection. And then fourth one is authentic gameplay assessment. And then the fifth one is the lesson planning. So far, at the seminar number 1, we covered the overview of the 5 critical components. And then the last seminar we had, which was the seminar 2, we covered tactical concept and problems and the game modifications. And then today, seminar 3, we are going to cover using questions and reflections and the authentic gameplay assessment. And then the next seminar, which is the last seminar, seminar 4, we'll talk about how to write a lesson plans and practice plans. So here are the 4 IAB, International Advisory Board members who will be presenting today. The first is Naoki Suzuki from Japan. He is the Associate Professor of Physical Education, Teacher Education at Tokyo Gakuei University in Japan. He has an interest in teaching and researching physical education and the teacher training, and is challenging to incorporate the ICT into physical education based on his previous research. And the Francesco Sgrò is an associate professor of sports science in the Faculty of Human and Society Sciences at the University of Ema in Italy. He is currently the TGfU IAB Italian representative. His research interests are focused on using the GBAs, especially the tactical games models in the physical education context, and on the assessment of human movement and sports performance. And the Dr. Aspasia Dania is an assistant professor at the School of Physics. She has many publications in peer-reviewed journals and edited books and presentations in many national and international physical education competencies. Her research interests focus on physical education, teacher education, game-based learning, professional development of teachers and coaches, qualitative research methods, and the curriculum planning, all with a focus on social justice. And again, my name is Kanae Haneishi, and I'm from USA. So this is the outline of today's webinar. We started with covering the topic number 3, third topic of 5 critical components, which is a question and reflection. And then we're going to move on to the topic 4, which is gameplay assessment. And then we will finish with some questions and answer session at the end. Okay, so let's dive in. So topic number 3, question and reflection. So this is, like I said, is the third component of the third critical components of game-based approach learning. So game-based approach, GBA, uses questioning technique to guide students to solve practical problems rather than providing them answers. The cognitive process that you are guiding the students or players on are very important, not only for gaining knowledge, but also for improving the performance. Question, reflection, and a dialogue provide opportunities for students and players to collaborate and test their ideas. It is important to ask open and divergent questions to stimulate students and players' thinking and dialogue and reflection. Teachers and coaches can ask questions at the following moments, for example. Number 1, during the flow of the lesson, which is sideline teaching or coaching. Number 2, during planned stoppage, such as breaks. Number 3, natural stoppage, such as throw-ins or ball out of play. And the 4th one is in the situation and moment, meaning that you freeze the game and then address and ask questions and going back to the play. So teachers and coaches can also stop a game and prompt students and players within their games, within their groups or teams to discuss and debate aspect of the game before returning back into the game to act on the points of the discussion. So here is the example of teachers questioning during the 3v3 volleyball lesson. Again, the key is to guide the students and players through the problem-solving process. So for example, teacher can ask, what did you do to contain the ball on your side of the net? Which is a tactical awareness question. And then student might say, hit the ball high in volleyball. And then teacher can follow up the question with spacing question, said, where would be the best place to pass the ball? And then students say, it's middle of the court. And if you want to ask something related to the skill executions and skill selection, you can use this how question, say, how did you hit the ball to keep control? And then student could say, we used our hands, which is overhead pass, or the bumped it using our forearm, which is a forearm pass. So once again, the important part is to guide students or players through the problem-solving process rather than you, teacher or coaches, providing an answer. In order to ask effective questions, here are 4 keys. Number 1, stay focused on the topic. Number 2, follow-up question is important as well. And then number 3, make students think and then let them know that it is okay to have various answers. And then last one is if you ask a yes or no question, make sure to follow up with why and how questions. So now Aspasia will cover about questioning and the reflection in more depth. Aspasia, go ahead.
Thank you, Kanae. Welcome, everybody. We're very glad to have you here. And let me continue from where Kanae stopped. We need very much to practice on questioning in all game-based approaches, because we need to make clever and players that have game sense. Also, we need questioning because we want them to problem solve and cooperate through inquiry learning, and also to stay attentive to tactics and technique throughout the game. So we need very much to help them through questioning, develop their cognitive skills and also their social skills within the game. So let's move on to the next slide. For us in Greece, questioning runs back to the ancient Greece with the Socratic method, because this was a method that was used for leading questions and answers to making inferences and conclusions. This is very appropriate both in teaching and in coaching, because it promotes not only comprehension, but also the recall of knowledge, which is in our case very important, and also the critical thinking skills. And both in education, it's not only used in physical education and coaching, but in other sciences as an effective instructional method. What are the benefits? The benefits is that questions help students concentrate. They make them more motivated, and through the feedback that they get, it makes it easier for them to retrieve knowledge, so that each one of them becomes an independent learner. And by being an independent learner, the connections between the cognitive and social aspects of game learning are better linked. So in literature, these are the benefits, but also when you start practicing questioning on the field or in your classroom, you will see the benefits yourself. Let's move on, Kanae. What are the areas in terms of critical thinking? Players and students can generate novel ideas and not play the same typical type of games, but also through problem solving, get better scores within gameplay. What else? They can develop a better subject matter learning. Whatever is the content of your class or the content of your practice, through questions, students or players can outperform others that do not practice with questioning. And what they develop, we need in our case, is their metacognition, to know why they know. So this is also developed with peer questioning or with teacher and coach scaffolding or the generation of some prompts. But the truth is that we are not accustomed to working with questions. And in this webinar, we try to give you some guidelines of what kind of or what types of questions can be used in your practice. We have two different types of questions. We have questions that focus on divergent thinking and questions that focus on convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is a question that generates ideas. How many different types of paths can you find to send the ball to your classmate or the ball to your team player? With this question, the players or the students generate by themselves different types of passes and show it to their coach or their teacher. On the other hand, as they practice, the teacher can ask a convergent thinking question, which focuses to one specific answer. And he may say, or he or she may say, from all the passes that you have shown me, which is the best to practice when you have a tall opponent in front of you, for example. or when your teammate is far away from you. So what we are practicing is to help students generate new ideas, both by their imagination, but also by the experience of the game, and use this experience and imagination afterwards to come to an answer that is the best for each different situation. This is the convergent type of question. What else? If we use Bloom's taxonomy, which is the order of thinking, we may say that we have two types of thinking skills. Low order thinking skills, which will be facilitated by the use of low order questions, and high order thinking skills, which will be facilitated by high order questions. As you climb in this ladder, in these steps, from the base to the top, the type of questions that you are using are different, and these types of questions refer to different types of thinking. For example, if you want your students or your players just to remember, you may use questions of the type who, what, where, and how. With this, you help them to retrieve knowledge that they already know. If you want them to understand what they are doing, this means that they already know, you ask questions of the type, can you explain in this situation the rules of this 3 versus 3 game? What do we ask them? Not only to remember the rules, but also to explain why we play by these rules. If you want your students to apply what they have learned, this means that they can remember and they understand as well. You ask questions of the type, how is the principle of maintaining ball possession related to the scoring of the game? There, you ask them to apply a concept that they already know and they understand, which in this case is the maintenance of ball possession, with the scoring of the game. So, but as we move on, we ask them to use their higher order skills more. By moving to analyzing, this is a high order thinking skills. They already know, they already combine concepts, but now we ask them, for example, to classify the rules according to scoring or the features of the game according to scoring. So they start putting a taxonomy in their thinking. And the next 2 levels of this is to help them evaluate what they already know. Do you agree with what your teammate answered? Or what other ideas could you add to make his or her answer better or the scoring of the game better? And the last step is to create, and here we have the higher order thinking skills. How could you invent a new way of passing that could help to connect better the maintain of ball possession with scoring? So as you can see here, as we move on, we ask them to we trigger their thought more and more. And next slide, Kanae. If we focus on the response type, what I was saying before, focused on the teacher. If we focus on the response type of the student or the player, we have different types of responses. The first is that there's no understanding, so the response type is pre-structural. If you see that students or players do not understand what you are asking, it means that you have to go at 1 level down. Because if you are asking an analyzing or an evaluating question and you don't get the answers that you need, you shouldn't give them the answer, because the theme is that you can help them develop their reflection skills and their thinking skills to questions. So if you see that they do not understand, you go a level down. There is also the response type that is unistructural. For example, the student is able to name and identify one aspect. For example, if we ask them to relate ball possession with scoring, he or she may be able to name what the scoring of the game but also not what do we mean by maintaining ball possession. So what you need to do in this case is that you must explain more and you spend more time on games that focus on maintaining ball possession. Another type of response is the multi-structural. The student is able to describe and combine multiple aspects. So if you see a reaction of this type, it means that you are able to move on the ladder that we are describing before. And the other types is the relational. They're not only able to explain, but also to identify the causes and effects, and the extended abstract thinking. Students or players are able to hypothesize and generate new ideas. So by having these categories in your mind, you play with your questions and add to their thinking. Next slide. So can we say that we have the best questions if these are triggering high order skills, or the worst question if these are triggering low order skills? No, the answer is no, but because the level of questions depends both on the subject, also on the students, and also on the context. So we can't have a specific type of questions for each case. This is why questioning is difficult, because you always have to observe, see what is happening, and then turn to the best level of questions and answers. So what does the literature say on this? The level of the question that you will use is determined by the cognitive process that is needed. So what is the age of the students? Do they have the skills or to cognitively process analyzing questions? They may not have. Are they able to understand and answer? Or what is the educational context? Are we teaching at a school, or are we teaching at a sport club? In both cases, all these interact in a dynamic way and show us what is the best question in each case. We can't say that high cognitive questions are categorically better, but also we can say that lower cognitive questions are more effective for primary level children. And also, if you're not accustomed to questioning, one good solution is to start by asking lower cognitive questions, because this will familiarize you more easily to the questioning process, because the questioning process is an open process. You may receive an answer that you do not expect. So by using lower cognitive questions, the cognitive load is also easier for you. Also, the lower cognitive questions are more effective when you want to talk about facts, about factual knowledge, something that has happened on the field. If you are going to talk about concepts in general, then you may use better higher order questions. But the combination is superior to the exclusive use of one type of question or the other. And also, as you move on to grades, the use of higher cognitive questions produces superior gains for secondary level students. So this means that according to their age and their developmental level, you will see the best possible solution. Here is an example. Can you explain the causes of defense penetration? This is a low order question. What ideas could you add according to the possible learner responses? And each learner has their own strategies to monitor the cognitive process. For example, you must be sure that they all know what defense means. They all know what are the principles of defense before asking them a lower or a higher order question. This means that you put the right type of questions at the right moment of your coaching or your teaching process. And this also depends from the students or from the players. Some of them may think more easily or more quickly, but others, they may need time to think and answer. So with the Socratic method that we have talked at the beginning, it's a good idea to let them take some time to think about the answer and afterwards raise their hands and give the answer. Because if you don't do this, some students who are quicker and more able to monitor their cognitive processes will be the ones that are only answering, and the others will be kept silent, and we don't want to do this. So, some general ideas for leaving this questioning part is that there is no one-size-fits-all questions. You have to work with questions yourself, and the reflection, teacher and coach reflection, is a very good idea to work with questions. You should start questioning yourself before going out and questioning your students. Also, before starting to question, it's a good idea to diagnose their level of development and cognitive structure. And how do you diagnose it? As we said before, by giving them some lower level questions in order to diagnose what is their level and how able they are to answer to your questions. All the games should put some cognitive challenges, and the cognitive challenges should help your students to become wise players and be able to stop and update and switch between facts. So as many open-ended scenarios within gameplay is a good idea for helping your students and your players to enact reflection and meaningful reflection of what is happening in each different open-ended scenario of the game. That's why we like so much the teaching games for understanding approach, because it poses lots of open-ended scenarios and it helps both the teachers and the coaches and the students and the players to grow cognitively and socially as they play. So, you should diagnose, you should add challenge, and help your students with learning to ask and answer questions. And how do we do this? I think that the next is the last slide. By putting always a scaffold to their understanding and help them to realize that it doesn't matter if their answer is wrong, but as far as they understand what they answered and change their reaction towards the questions afterwards. So one more slide. We should develop a pedagogy of questioning because this will help our students and players to cognitively develop new knowledge. But how are we going to do this? We should work with our previous and new experiences, and every time put a challenge by different types of questions to what we observe that is happening in the field. So thank you very much. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Aspasia. That was very helpful. Thank you. It was great. So now we are going to move on to the next topic that we are going to cover, which is the authentic gameplay assessment. Once again, that's the fourth component of the 5 critical components of game-based approach learning. So in this portion of the presentation, I am going to present this on behalf of Dr. Sgrò. The assessment is a relevant part of the teaching and the coaching practices and processes. to be effective, assessment needs to be formative. It doesn't simply measure students' or players' performances, but it has to help students, players to improve it. Moreover, to be really authentic in connection to game-based approaches, assessment used by teachers and coaches needs to be to assess gameplay skills within the game context. And the assessment needs to assess tactical awareness, and the assessment needs to account for the social dimension of the game. So Game Performance Assessment Instrument, GPAI, was mainly developed for the school, was proposed to teachers because they can use or adapt the methods across different games, such as invasion games, network games, strikings and fieldings, and the various sports, which is soccer and volleyball and other sports. GPAI can be used for assessing on and off the ball gameplay skills related to decision-making, moving, and goal-oriented skills. The teachers and coaches can use peer assessment can also use peer assessment to support the development of implicit gameplay skills by their students, involving them in the assessment procedure. So GPAI components are observable across different game categories and sport disciplines. 3 of these components are focused on the scoring phase, and the other 4 are focused on preventing scoring. For their assessment, each teacher or coach can build a personal schema by combining 3 or more of the 7 gameplay components of which GPAI is composed. From the data acquired by means of GPAI's components, some index for summarizing performance can be estimated with the following formula. For example, for the decision-making index, DMI can be determined by appropriate decisions made divided by appropriate plus inappropriate decision made. Skill execution index, SEI, is determined by efficient skill execution divided by efficient plus inefficient skill execution, the number of those. And then supported index, SI, is determined by appropriate support movement divided by number of appropriate and inappropriate support movement. And then game involvement, GI, is determined by the appropriate plus inappropriate decisions made plus efficient and inefficient skill execution, plus appropriate support movements. And then game performance, GP, is that you can use this formula, DMI plus SEI plus SI divided by 3. So the last 2 indexes, indexes, GI and GP, represents the level of involvement of each player in the assessed match and the overall performance in a such match. If a teacher or coach decides to use more than 3 components, the number of index used for estimating GP increases proportionally. The second table shows how the observation recording sheet was made and used for acquiring data related to the player's performance by means of a tallies system. In the table, each X represents 1 observation. So how many times they made those decisions, like how many times they executed those skills. So as you observe those executions and decisions, you cross it. The second table shows how the performances of 3 different players can be summarized by means of the previously described indexes. For example, Matthew was highly involved in the match and made good decision-making and the skill execution. But his movement for supporting the team's possessions was not excellent. In Sasha also showed overall sufficient performances, but she made many mistakes in decision and skill execution. And then Nicholas showed poor performance, and he was involved in the game very few times. Overall, his performance was insufficient. So moving from these measures, a teacher can develop different game-based approach, GBA-based lessons related to the different level of complexity for improving the aspects of the player's performance, which needs match reinforcement. The team sports assessment. So the next assessment tool called Team Sports Assessment Procedure, TSAP, was developed by the French School of Sports Pedagogy in 1997. So for each of the indicated sports, the author of the TSAP identified some adaptations of the field's dimensions, roles, and the number of players per team. So TSAP mainly developed for assessing students and players learning in authentic game situations. TSAP can be used as formative and summative assessment scenarios in which tactical learning was the main focus. And TSAP can be also used for peer assessment with the students of middle and high school levels. And the TSAP can be used also only for assessing on-the-ball skills related to some sports, such as soccer, volleyball, handball, hockey, and the basketball. So the data are recorded according to the performance produced by each player when he or she can play the ball. Number 1, the gaining possessions. So gaining possessions is acquiring the ball, CB, and then receiving the ball, RB. And then description of that was there, on the slide. And the disposing the ball is the playing a neutral ball, which is NB, and the losing the ball, LB, and playing an offensive ball, OB, and executing the successful shot, SS. And like I said, description of each of the components are on this slide as well. From the data acquired by means of TSAP observation sheet, 3 index for summarizing performance can be estimated with the formula shown in table 1. So VP, the volume of play, represents the level of involvement of each player. EI, efficiency index, represents the on-the-ball skill efficiency of each player. And the PS, performance score, represents a goal score of, represents a global score of a player's performance or a report of the strengths. The second table shows how the observation recording sheet was made and used for acquiring data related to the player's performance by means of the tally system. In the table, each number represents the sum of the observation for each TSAP component during the 3v3 basketball match. The second table shows how the gameplay performance of 3 different players can be summarized by means of the previously described components. For example, Kevin shows a performance significantly highest than the ones of their teammates. And Shelly and Karen showed similar result, even if Shelly seems to be much more involved in the game and perform better skills. So you can see from those numbers. As for the GPAI explanation, moving from these measures, a teacher or coach can develop different GBA-based lessons for improving the aspects of the player's performance which much need reinforcement. So now I'm going to hand over to Naoki, who's going to be explaining more practical tools and the knowledge of the authentic gameplay assessment. Naoki, go ahead.
Hi, hello. I'm Naoki Suzuki. Kanae has talked about the basic information of the assessment for GBAs. So I would like to talk about specific utilizations. GPAI and others can be implemented using technology. Please see the slide. This study card was created on Jamboard. It was implemented in a net and wall type game units for 5th graders. 3 observers each wrote on their tablets on a Jamboard shared by 3 students. One checked the role in carrying the ball out. The other wrote down the ball's trajectory and how the attacker delivered the ball to opponent. Another checked the defender's position when the ball was sent out and whether or not a goal was scored at that time. These 3 student information was combined and united to make a card like a slide. In their reflections, learners synthesized so these 3 pieces of information of assess their play and thought about the future. Being able to connect on the network allowed each observer to assess the game in their role. As a result, this practice promoted tactical awareness and deepened tactical understanding. Okay, next slide. It is not often that all students participate in the game as players in the PE lessons. I think some students may be courtside observing the game. When observers assess players' game performance, they can use technologies to conduct an assessment collaboratively. Okay, next slide. It is easier to share online tools if every student has a device connected to Wi-Fi. Jamboard and Whiteboard are specific tools for collaborative working online. In addition, these tools make it possible for multiple students to write on a single study card. I developed the e-assessment tool that allows 3 observers to share and write multiple game assessment information simultaneously. I am going to introduce one example tool. That tool paid attention to the attack. The 3 observers divided the observation and recording of each item on the slide. Observer A recorded who passes to whom and who shot. In this diagram, the pass went from student B to C to A, and the student A took a shot, but it did not go in, so a cross is recorded in the shot column. Observer B recorded a circle if the pass was a good, and a cross if it was bad. Observer C recorded the trajectory of the ball. Okay. So next slide. So team C played the game with a focus on making quick passes to nearby teammates. However, after the match was over, they looked at the assessment tool. They had recorded and analyzed the result as follows. When we passed to the teammate nearby, we failed because we passed more often and it took longer. So in the next game, they increased the long pass and short with fewer passes. So I believe that using technology to collaboratively check learning outcomes is an effective game performance assessment method. Okay, next move on the another assessment method. So GCAI is a game contribution assessment instrument. So GCAI focuses on the nature of the participation according to the specific situation and the context within which it occurs. Thus, both teachers and students engage in the assessment process where measures of overall game participation are interpreted according to the individual's ability within the game context and the game situations. Performance is also viewed holistically without emphasis on decontextualized learning segments. Suzuki asserted that GCAI could be considered a more authentic assessment of game performance due to assessing each player's contribution within specific situational and contextual game challenges. The use of GCAI can further engage players and athletes in the assessment process, thus aiding the teaching and the learning process. But it was still unclear whether or not to promote tactical understanding. Therefore, I am going to introduce a simple player-centered assessment instrument based on GCAI. Okay, next slide. So in the new assessment, okay, just after some word, so I will show the video. Just stop now. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, in the new assessment, the problem solving and assessment setting are closely related. First, we will begin by clarifying contribution standards that are the key to GCAI. In other words, making a standard is essential. The standard then thinks about their game, looks back at the game, and clarifies a contribution that the game seeks in relation to tactical challenges. The new assessment assumed that the students create standards. Okay, so please see the video clip. It is set to stop shooting every 20 seconds. After taking a video, the cameraman saves it if it is essential to look back on it. Deletes it if they believe it is unnecessary, and shoots repeatedly. So through these thoughts, tactical awareness and tactical understanding will deepen. Then look back at the video they have taken as a group and look back on their game. In this way, the game videotaping the game and the video review are repeated to clarify the standard of contribution in the game. After repeating it to some extent, they write it down on the digital whiteboard and assess it. Okay, so next slide. According to the student reflections, they had positive feelings about implementing this assessment instrument, and they had a great feeling that it was being used. In addition, since assessment is performed according to criteria based on their own needs, more than 80% of students described episodes that lead to create assessment perspectives and use assessment information to improve performance. Furthermore, before they used this assessment, many students thought it was not easy to do this, but many respondents said it was easy to work thanks to assessment flow after the generation of standards. By reviewing the video, they could think again about what they were thinking about. Still, there was an option that reassessing what they were assessing here with their friends would help them develop their assessment ability. Many students responded that tactical understanding was used and improved performance. This new assessment instrument promoted tactical understanding and understood that performance was improved. Okay, thank you, that's all.
Thank you very much, Naoki and Aspasia. So now we're gonna open to the floor for any questions and reflections and comments. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I have a question. Yes. My name is Petros Natsis, as you see. I couldn't watch all this webinar. I came late, but I have a question. According to the use of all of this in practical domain, how many of you have used this in practical decisions in school, not only for science, not only for make a paper or make science, but in practical, have you in schools are used all these assessment tools?
Yes. So I think the question is like in practical situation in teaching and physical education, you know, I think that I guess your question is more like how common it is to that teacher actually use these tools. Is that did I summarize the question okay?
Yes. If these tools are used in practice.
Yes.
From you or from some others that you know.
Okay, who, Aspasia, do you want to answer that?
Thank you, Petros, for the question. We are always concerned that what we are suggesting can be applied in practice. And the question is that, as Linda once said, that we should use small steps in whatever we are learning and apply it small in our practice. For example, we could use one dimension of GPAI, for example, skill learning or decision making, and apply it in our lessons by peer teaching. For example, I have students divided in pairs, and one group A is playing and group B is watching, for example, and then they give each other feedback about their decision-making abilities within the game, and then we have discussion on this. So in research, we have applied the GPAI, and it's very useful, and TSAP, and what Naoki also showed, all these are very useful. They're not as complicated as they seem At the beginning, they seem very complicated, but when the observers start using them, then it's easy to apply in practice. So if we want to also use it at schools, and it's a good type of formative assessment and not summative, we can focus short on some dimensions and start small. So this is my answer.
Yes, I believe I understand this because I first implement this game sense model in university in my class with students, university students, and it went very well, the practice. But the next step, as you said, maybe is to implement the assessment tools with these tools. So I think we add more motivation. It will be something more motivate for them, and with some steps, step by step, to conclusion all this. All this. Okay, thank you for your answers.
I totally agree. I think it's from my experience, in order to implement in actual lesson in physical education, like at school, number one, teacher needs more trainings. So because they have so much things to teach that they are not comfortable doing it. But after they, number one, I think we need more education for teachers, how to do it. And then number two, like Aspasia said, once students practice more in GPAI, it's actually not as complicated as it seems. And it's actually better in terms of like higher level of thinking that Aspasia was talking about. Like, because now they have to analyze their peers' performance, that gives more like another opportunity for the problem solving as well. So the implementation is doable if you start small, like 1 or 2 index components, and then the educating the teacher. I think it's something that we need to keep doing it too. Thank you. So is anyone else have any other questions?
Aspasia, have you made your presentation?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, that was fantastic. Well, anyway, it's past now 1 hour, so I think this is a great time. So thank you everyone for being here and joining us for this TGfU Introduction to Game-Based Approaches webinar series, seminar number 3. So just so you all know, the last seminar, last segment of this webinar series, Introduction to Game-Based Approaches, we are going to be covering what is game-based approaches lesson plan or practice plan actually looks like. So we'll provide some of the examples, hopefully from the different games categories, so people have some idea of what is actually the lesson plan looks like. That is on October 29th, in 2 weeks at the same time. So you will receive, I'm sure, a notification from Ellen and the social media and website announcement as well. Once again, everyone, thank you very much for being here and then joining us today. I hope you learned something useful in your teaching coaching field, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully in the last session of the webinar series on the October 29th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice